We're sorry, your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number and dial again.
High school girls won. That's where Kate was.
Welcome to the audio conferencing center. Please enter a conference ID followed by pound.
Yeah, it's a mess right now. It's gotten a lot worse. Play with the budget.
If you're the meeting organizer, press star now.
See, thank you for.
After the tone, please record your name and then press pound. Please wait for the leader to admit you to the meeting. Thank you for your patience.
The state schools committee is
Yeah, he's actually got the auditory. We're gonna do like a presentation.
right.
So you're downstairs? Mike, are we going downstairs for or are they coming up here? Figure it out. We're going downstairs. They're pretty cool. The Georgia Academy for the Blind is in the Atlanta area. Got it. Okay. In technically, vision school, they actually.
I got the box already down there in Tiffany's office. Everything like that.
What is it? And what is the? Is it Pine? Not Pine. Pine is library. What is the fourth technical school? Is huh? No. I mean, I know Cave Springs, Chamblee is. But then there's that fourth, the ones that control the motor. To send out the auditory units and stuff. What is that called?
Okay, let me try to get one too.
They had a name.
No, we're waiting on you.
Yeah, I mean, they're not really a school, but they operate like a school. They're considered the fourth arm. I can't remember what they are.
Like the MASH.
No, they can't sit beside each other.
They won't let us do it anywhere else.
That's going to drive me crazy. What is it called? What is the fourth stage? It's not a physical school, but they send out the auditory.
Welcome to the audio conferencing center.
No, it's a fourth
Please
stage.
enter a conference ID followed by pound.
X-ray?
Cave Springs?
No, it's not an actual school.
Mikey, what'd you write?
It's considered the fourth branch. When I came to writing convention, that's the fourth.
After the tone, please record your name and then press pound.
Yeah, that's it. We actually used to consider them like
You are now joining the
it
meeting.
never made sense.
Which one was it?
Powell Center. Smokey Powell.
Bucky Powell.
Which is your Butch is
Gotta be
on.
Butch. How Butch know?
All right, welcome back, everybody.
No.
My name is
that?
While you're working on that, first thing I need to do is entertain a motion to adjourn from executive session. Second. I have a first from Mr. Downey, I have a second from Mr. Long. All those in favor?
Aye.
Right, so now we are convened as a committee of the whole. And first of all, I'm really, really glad everyone's here today. And the matter before us is something that is on our agenda for tomorrow. And it's the adoption of a state board rule reducing the weight of the end of course test as we have currently posted from the 20% number to a 10% number. There's been a 30-day window between when we actually posted that, and during which time the superintendent's office, Georgia Department of Education, put out for public comment and survey information, and each of you have received that survey information. I believe there was over 90,000 respondents, 93,000 respondents, 86+% favoring the .01 recommendation.
Is now joining.
And I think, does everybody have copies of that survey response? Okay. And I believe Ms. Jones, while we were meeting earlier, has distributed to each member the written comments, so you should be able to preview those.
Is now exiting.
Between now and when we're voting. What I wanted to do, I did not ask the superintendent to make any presentations of any kind here. I know that since we had the posting, that a lot of board members have received lots of different feedback from different people and different. So I'd love to have a conversation about the feedback that you've received. And then in addition, what I've asked the superintendent is really to have the subject matter experts in the room to address our questions. Right? So those questions that you have relative to this matter, the adoption of the state board rule, and currently that 10% recommendation, would like to go ahead and get those questions out of the table. This could be a short discussion, could be a long discussion, but at the end of the day, what my goal is to make sure that what we've done is done all of our due diligence, and then when we cast our votes tomorrow relative to this, which I think is one of the most important decisions that the state board is contemplating this year, I liken it to a deck of playing cards, and at the end of the day, we've got 52 playing cards, and every single one of them is face up. All right, so they're already a surprise. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions or comments that somebody may have. Deb?
Chairman Sweeney, can you speak closer into the mic? Getting comments from those folks on the,
All right, is that better? Can you hear me? It's on.
okay.
All right. So anyway, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions or comments that anybody may have at this time. Megan?
I have some questions. I mean, because there's been, I'm trying to, I think I said enough last time. I'm trying not to monopolize the time. I'm really not. But there's been so many things going back and forth, and there are good, reasonable arguments on both sides of this issue. And I just want to start by saying to my fellow board members, if you vote for the 10% or you vote against it, I respect that, and we've got to vote. It's a hard vote. We got to vote and move on. So I just want to put that out there and say that, because I do. I respect your right and your opinions, and if we're not all together on this, that's what boards do, and you vote and you move on. And I just want to try to, not intentionally, that just came to me, but try to even set the tone for our discussion in that manner. And that's where I am anyway. But one of the things that's kind of I've thought about is we didn't talk a lot, and I didn't talk a lot about kids in our last meeting. And I've talked to my daughter, I've talked to my daughter's friends, and I've talked to some teachers. I got feedback from an AP teacher last night, and but where I'm going with this, and this is not something we've discussed, and this is new, to this discussion, because I'm not sure how this could work. In fact, for just the sake of discussion, it stays at 10%, just for that sake. What are the rules and what can we do? I'm in Gwinnett County. I've helped children, daughter's friends. They've got a great credit recovery program in Gwinnett County. And kids that maybe aren't getting what they need to be proficient in an EOCT, I'm just throwing some stuff out there, just bear with me for a second because it's really two-faceted. And they don't achieve the scores that they need, or they haven't mastered it because they've been in the environment we have. We know those are out there. Gwinnett's credit recovery program allows children to go back in and take expedited, work with the system. They get expedited and specific targeted help on where they're weak. They are able to get that specific targeted help, and then they go back and retake or get credits to recover and get to where they are, to where they're comfortable, they have mastered to a certain level and able to get the credit. How does that work? So say we do have kids, because I don't want kids to get quoted, this isn't punishment, but that's words thrown out there a lot. What can happen for the sake of argument, we stay at 10% and some kids need credit recovery or they didn't get where they need to be because of no fault of their own. Is that a state? I know Gwinnett does it. I know other districts do it, and some do it better than others. How can we look and change rules maybe to allow for retesting or supplementary credit recovery and really targeting, and this gets beyond EOCTs. This gets to a kid that doesn't take an EOCT but has a final that weighs 20% and they don't do well on that. What can we do as a board, whether this is 0.01 or this is 20, anywhere in between, to help those kids and make exceptions to rules or allow districts to make exceptions to rules for kids to be able to go beyond this semester and even beyond next semester and take credit recovery or be able to have another bite at the apple so that they are not adversely affected, so we can still get the data we need and get and it be meaningful. I don't want to get in that, I mean, obviously we are, but just putting that to the side right now and say, we understand. We know you need additional help, and your EOCT or whatever showed us you're weak in these parts of the standards. How can we help them and allow, like Gwinnett does with credit recovery, how can we do that, or is anybody else aware of how that works, and what can we do as a board to help make sure those kids are served? Anybody?
My question to that would be, you said credit recovery, so does that mean they failed the class or they did not pass the EOC? Because I don't know, are you allowed to take an EOC, retake the EOC for a class you've already completed? Do you have to say you failed the class, retake the class for credit recovery? What does it look like?
I think you don't pass this.
Well, I know that specifically, obviously, one of the children that we helped as our family, she ended up having to withdraw from class. She ended up not completing the class and didn't.
Okay, so she didn't take her EOC.
No, she didn't take it. She was missing a lot.
So
There a lot of life happened, but we were able to help her get graduated in time.
So I guess that would be an important question.
Yeah.
If you take an EOC and you
bomb it.
You bomb it. But I mean, when you take the EOC, you're at the end of the class. You're at the end of the class. So you either, do they have to go in there and say they withdraw from the class or whatever? Or is it allowable to take the same EOC, because it's going to be the same EOC? I mean, so it's going to have.
Is it allowable? Is that a rule? Is that state law? Is that federal? I don't know.
And then on that, when you're talking about her having to withdraw, what about students who? I don't think there's any accommodation in anything. I think EOC has to be taken at the school. It can't, unless you live somewhere where you can hire proctors to go out to the homes that would allow the kids in. So if you don't come to the school to take an EOC and you're doing distance learning, virtual learning, whatever you want to call it, and because of health reasons, your parents say you cannot come to the school and take that test, then it's a 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got, I mean, that's.
Same thing with milestones.
Obviously, I spoke, I guess can we, for the sake of discussion, because that's a valid
Yeah.
point. I've talked with a few administrators on that as well, on the 95% rule and that and zeros and how are they going to get kids in digital. Two large systems weren't terribly concerned about the ability to get the stagger, to be able to get kids in, to be able to separate them and do that. They were more concerned with parents saying, no, I'm not going to allow my can't.
Won't allow them to come back
It
into
was
the
less
school
of an
setting.
issue to them on how to figure out how to do it. All right, no, we've already got a plan. We can do that. We can stagger it. We can make it work. That's not our worry. Our worry is how are we going to be held accountable for a mom that just says, no, my student's not taking it. And that, I mean, that's a very valid question, which I think is maybe a little bit, they're related, but a little bit separate from how can we help kids that haven't gotten the instruction they need to be successful on the test, or not even just that test, whether it's a non-EOC course and a non-EOC, whether it's, a junior in economics that didn't get what they needed and therefore didn't do well in the class. How can we do that? How can we look, I guess that's my question, how can we look out of the box, EOC or non-EOC, and I guess expansion of the Gwinnett County credit recovery. I'm just talking, I'm throwing things out there. I'm trying to just generate discussions on what we can do and what needs to be done from a rule standpoint. We've got our and here's an opportunity. I spoke with a member of the legislature last night on this issue, called me and said, look, Mike, we're coming up on the legislative session. If there's something we need to change, because they'll be done, hopefully, they weren't last year, but God willing, they'll be done with the legislative session before we end school. And if there's something, a law that needs to be changed or something that needs to be tweaked or done, he was willing, he said, let me know what we can do to help in this 500-year flood. He was supportive of 10%, by the way, but he said, look, but we know if there's a law that needs to be changed or something, let us know. And that's why I'm trying to maybe even, since we just opened it up for discussion and we don't, as a board and these people, everybody around here has got relationships in every corner of the state. How can we try to be proactive even going into this legislative session, rule, law, otherwise, and helping those students? Because this isn't over in December 31st. We don't know what, obviously, miraculously, there's 2 companies that have vaccines on the horizon. But I won't get into that, but hopefully that helps, and that we're able to 2021, fall of 2021 is going to be somewhat normal. Hopefully, we don't know that. So how can we be proactive in rule and law and support for the districts that don't have what can we do? I guess it's just really where my question is. And I have personally seen the credit recovery system in Gwinnett County work well for students, for those who are going through life circumstances, and it worked.
So I think most school systems have.
Yeah.
Everybody has a credit recovery
recovery.
program of some sort.
We do. Can I offer this even to go even deeper?
Before you go there, Helen, do you have?
Oh, never mind.
I mean, no, I'm just trying to, make sure you're getting an answer to your question, because, what I'm hearing is, about this credit recovery program and what happens if somebody fails an EEOC test. What can they do?
Yep.
All right. So do you have somebody that can weigh in on that, Superintendent Woods?
Well, I mean, when you look at credit recovery, typically it means you did fail the course. That is where you go. Credit recovery looks a little different. A lot of this is online as far as that. And sometimes, again, depending on the system, credit recovery looks a little different where you go. Is Dr. Timberlake, or you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
In your experience with the credit recovery, can you address any of this information, please?
Certainly. So as you know, sorry, there's feedback. As you know, the EOC counts as a portion of students' final grades. So if students do not participate in the EOC, the school and district would be compelled to either issue an incomplete until the student completes that requirement, or they would have to issue a 0 and calculate that into students' final grades. And then if the student fails the course and they don't receive credit and that grade goes as part of their GPA, then they would have the opportunity to do credit recovery or re-enroll in the course, in which case they would take the test again. We do offer an EOC retest opportunity. So, for example, if the student was going to pass the course, but their performance on the EOC is what brought their grade down to failing, they could participate in one EOC retest to try and get that score up enough to help them pass the class.
So there is an EOC retest opportunity, and then what I heard is the school can issue an incomplete until that. Do we have to, for instance, just for the sake of debate, we have a parent that has a home life that cannot get COVID. You've got family issues and they can't risk it, but maybe in February things get better, they can, and then incomplete. Would we have to open that window? Is there anything we would have to do? And then is there anything, I guess you hear, credit recovery is usually they failed or didn't get a grade in the class, or they withdrew, whatever. Can we broaden that to other opportunities in that they didn't get what they needed in the class? And for the sake of argument, it's been mentioned the Kids for Hope Scholarship. A kid that's trying on the bubble needs a Hope Scholarship, and they're really short, but it was deemed because of the COVID, they didn't get what they needed to score well in the class. Could credit recovery be used as an option there? I'm talking out loud and trying to think outside the box a little bit about some stuff. And then before Allison, because how does the EOC retake option work, and what are the parameters around that?
Certainly. Regarding the retest and I guess your question about incompletes, the school or district could issue that incomplete. I don't think there's anything we need to do. I will say that the EOCs are developed to be administered at the end of instruction. So if a student has to wait weeks or months to take a test after instruction has ended, that can and likely would impact their performance on that test. We do have the retest opportunity available that can be taken in a subsequent window. And as you know, we do have administration windows practically every month of the year, so there are opportunities for that. And regarding the parameters of that, if the student does not pass the EOC, and that they would have the opportunity to take a retest to improve their grade, and they could take that in any window.
So it sounds like there's a good bit of flexibility there.
There is.
All right, Helen?
Well, let me just add, so Allison, if you're on a 4x4 block, the schedule, and how is that going to work for someone because they take part of this course and then they take something else and then they go back and take the course that has end of course. Is that correct?
Yes, it would be very challenging. We have always recommended that students participate in the EOC at the conclusion of instruction, which is why we do have so many windows, because we know schools have so many different calendars and instructional models that we want to make sure those opportunities are available at the appropriate time.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking of going even a little bit deeper. I like your thought about what we can do to kind of intervene to help those students. But we had a survey that Richard, y'all put out. We had a survey from Gale that gave another option that said what else. And on some of the surveys from Gale, I'm just looking at the granular things that we need to be thinking about, and why this .01 came up. So one of the things that was said is that approximately 25% of our student population selected the online learning option. The number of students who are either quarantined or sick due to COVID-19 is in constant fluctuation. I'm not sure how to begin scheduling end of course during the testing windows. And if you're on a 4x4 block schedule, and we anticipate giving the numbers of quarantines a higher percentage of incompletes at the end of the semester. Now, this can answer some of the things, Mike, you said. This is not the year they're thinking to factor in end of course grades. But also the other thing was that what happens to students, I think this was one of the things that was said, that the accountability for learning when they have not been exposed to the content enough was one of the issues that was brought up. So this could be another thing, as Mike is saying, what do we do? How do we manage to help that student when the content has not been covered? And we know that a lot of people, especially where I live in South Georgia, they don't even have the internet. So I'm thinking of all these variables that are out there and that we're playing with. But I'm also thinking about, and I take this very seriously, and I think we all do. I have talked to my people in my district, and I'm kind of like Mike. I get some that say, I think 10% is fine. Is there a compromise between the 0.1 and the 10? I think that with this dropout of students or parents not wanting their kids to take the test, that if the parent knew, or if there was a little something to that percentage of the end of course, that would maybe spur them on to help their children make that decision to take a test. But I also have been thinking about, we sent in this waiver, and we asked that we not give milestones, and we asked that we not have accountability for this year. Well, we really didn't have an option B. So now we're coming back trying to think of those things that could have been an option B. And I know you might resubmit, Richard, but this came out of a discussion with some of my superintendents, and I had a teacher, and I've had parents give some feedback. But they said, what if we ask for a waiver for milestones to become, and I use this word prescriptive, or maybe more formative, in the fact that what we're trying to understand from this test is what our students gained and what they didn't gain, and what we're going to have to fill back in academically that they have missed over progression of these months that they have been out with COVID or online learning, or not having the right connectivity, or quarantined, or all these fragments that are out there. So what if we asked for a waiver that brought it down to a more prescriptive or formative level, dropped it down to the district level, and the accountability for milestones at the district would be, what are you going to do to either beat the odds or show growth within your district with what you gain from the information that you got from that test? Now, we've never talked about any of this before. We just got this thing that said, hey, we want to do these waivers. But I think there merits some discussion in looking deeper down and seeing what we can do and ask for, because you got this 95% rule. And yes, you had a large number of people that said they wanted to go with that, but I don't want us to be leadership through doing a bunch of surveys too. I mean, I appreciate the numbers and I understand, and that's why I'm taking this very seriously. But I would love for us to have leadership coming down with us to determine and massage some things and really look at the core of what is needed to happen for students so that we can best serve them, meet their needs, best serve the districts. I don't want an open record to come to a district where they don't have connectivity, where the kids haven't had a choice of content knowledge, and all of a sudden you pull up this big number and it says 60. Because that's deflating to the teacher that's working their fannies off, and the principals that are really in there digging deep to try to meet the needs of the kids, but they've got all these other variables. I would love to see an open record when it came to a district and they said, hey, we beat the odd by doing this. No number, but this is what we did to bring our kids back, or to try to manage how we're going to help them. And Mike was on that same track. How can we manage how we can help these students so that they can again get what they're needed to get back to grade level, maintain some of the loss that we had over these months that they were out? This is my biggest concern of what can we do. 10% or whatever, I don't, you know, that's just a number at the end. But we've got to figure out what we can do to really hit at the bottom of what we're talking about, why we're having this discussion, and what we need. Have we even gotten a waiver for the teachers not to be held accountable for the test?
Waiver?
Yeah?
We don't need a waiver.
Well, with TEKS, it's a part of the accountability system. If you have to give it, and correct me, I need some help here. We're giving milestones. Right now, we're told you have to give the test, and you're going to be held accountable for the test. Well, holding accountable for that test meant that we had to line up with the CCRPI, and part of that was the teacher felt. As a teacher, you felt pressure to make sure that those students had that content. So we haven't done anything in TEKS or LEADS or to offer that support to that teacher to let them know that, yes, we're having to spend $17 million on this test, and yes, we're having to ask our teachers to take it, to give it, and yes, we're having to ask our students to take it. Mike talked about something to support the student in trying to take this test. I'm talking about both, the student and the teacher. So we haven't looked into, I think that's something a board could do. We could actually draft probably through policy some kind of waiver that would say that the hold harmless for a teacher. But those are the kind of things that I think we've been missing out on only because we don't have any opportunity to really talk and look at this and work together and collaborate. And it makes me sad because I have really been given time after time after time, conversation, people calling me. What do you think? Oh, I think 10's fine. No, I'd like to see a compromise. I want to do, and I know everybody here does, what is in the best interest of our students and our teachers in our district. What I threw out just then about a waiver, and I've talked to some people that are in higher parts of education, said that could be an option, Richard, for us to look into for accountability. And coming back if we send it to the feds. That's what they're asking us to do, give a test and give accountability. Well, can our accountability be dropping down to the district level? And we can monitor that. The DOE could monitor that. Once they say, here's my contract with the state of what I'm going to do to support these kids and to build the bridge of what we're missing through academic services, through resources, through whatever's needed. That's what we're going to find out on this test, what worked well, what didn't work well. And we should be utilizing that way. That's all I got.
Isn't there something out there this year for TEKS and LEAKS, though, some flexibility for the school system?
I have not seen it. That's why I was asking.
No, we got an email from Debbie on 10/8.
What did it say? It wasn't.
Closer to your mic.
As you know, Superintendent Woods is strongly committed to extending grace instead of mandates during the unprecedented times. I won't read word for word. The requirement for TEKS and LEAKS is set forth in state law and cannot be waived by DOE. However, effective immediately, Godot is providing the below flexibility to school leaders and teachers, and it's a.
Well, what does that mean? I mean, help me here.
You want me to send this to you?
That was on 10/8.
10/8.
Richard, what does that mean that you are offering to them?
Well, I mean, as far as the number of observations, typically we have multiple observations with TEKS and LEAKS and teacher accountability. In our determination, multiple meant two. So that, again, the school district can determine what that means and what that looks like. Just a minimum of two. It's a baseline. So schools can address that. Teacher observation doesn't feel
Well,
necessary.
the self-assessment is suspended for this year, I think, right?
Yeah, there's about 7 or 8 actions in
Yeah.
there that address
CAPS and
TEKS.
LAPS summative assessment ratings cannot be determined because of the challenge of rating all performance standards. Therefore, they are not required by Godot or GAPSC for the 2021 school year.
I can't find that
I
one.
can't find it. I got that. I
Are you
use,
checking your DOE?
Yeah, I'm in
Usually
on all Debbie's emails,
yep.
10/8.
so I don't see that one.
Well, anyway, some of us got it and some of us didn't, and it could be my
I'm sure it was
fault.
sent to
As y'all
everyone.
know,
I'm sure it was sent to everyone.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I'm sure it was. I just,
Sometimes it bounces back or goes into spam.
And sometimes when you search on phones, you don't get
Yeah,
everything.
it's horrible.
Yeah.
well, and sometimes everything, so right now, we're saying, because with TEKS, I know you're saying that you have given 6 supportive waivers, so to speak, or that we don't have to, observations are gonna be limited this time. So the teacher's not, so the teacher knows that, then why did, in these reviews, why did the teacher feel that it was a lot of stress there? Obviously, I don't know if they know that there's some relief there. I know it. Every one of these things says the stress on the teacher. That's what I was concerned about. And so if we have done that, then I think I would love to get a copy. I'd love it to send to all my districts again and make sure that they know and have a conversation with the teachers that call and say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I missed seeing this, and
Let me, Superintendent
Can you
Woods.
send that to me?
Superintendent Woods, was that
can you
sent to
send
all the
it to Helen
districts?
Rice?
Yes, and it was Paige and GA, the teacher organization, shared it with their members.
Debbie, is your
So
email up?
hang on a second.
So we discussed it.
Forward to us the email from the 8th, from October the 8th,
Sure.
So,
on
Teaks leaks
on
status and
Teeks leaks
flexibility.
status, please.
so Mike, hang on a second. Helen, what Superintendent Woods and Mr. Jones were just articulating is that document that you're asking has already been sent to all of the districts, and it has already been sent out, you said, through Page and also GAE?
GA as well.
Yeah, I talked with some of my school systems. I've talked with all of them, but they have talked about, they do, I know some of the superintendents I've talked to have gotten it.
So are you wanting it to be sent again? I mean,
Well, I think there needs to be some communication, because if some of us on the board don't know about it, and I know I had several conversations with superintendents, and it was a little vague, because, to say that you're not held accountable for the test, all of these other things are options that are in Teeks and Leaks, like observations, and is a teacher doing what they're supposed to be doing? Are they getting professional learning? Those are all components in there. But the drill down to the test, the testing score, I think that was still of a little concern. Does it say in that they're not held accountable for?
Their professional development?
No, for their students' grade on the end of course, so to speak, or, that's where all this.
The teacher's taken out of the equation when it comes to
Well-
the evaluation of the students.
Well, there will be no repercussions.
That's the best word, Mike. That's what I'm looking for. No repercussions. Just like he's saying no repercussions for the kids that take the test, they need some support. And especially with all these fragments of things, connectivity, parents, choosing to have them at home. Some are so young that it's hard for them to even sit still. I mean, we know all of those things. So maybe tie that up for us, Richard, on what it really says. And no repercussions for the teacher in dealing with the testing. Is that what it says?
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Yeah, I mean, it says they won't have a summative score, which is that's how teachers were ranked and evaluated, as the summative score, so.
Debbie just resent it.
Okay.
Did I also understand that kind of from the observations too, essentially what you're doing is establishing a floor, and that if a district wants to do more observations, it certainly has the flexibility to do so?
That is correct.
Well, there are a lot of districts already doing those observations. I mean, they like this format. The only thing, like I said, that was a big hiccup was the repercussions of the test score. And so if that's been eliminated, I certainly can call several people and, and kind of tie that up too. But, I mean, they didn't have a problem with the things a lot of teachers, like you probably found out too, they were already doing a lot of these things. And the other question too is the end of course test, the weight there, but Mike mentioned this too. There are a whole bunch of teachers that are teaching courses that don't have end of course, but they do have final grades. And those finals count X amount of 10% or something. We have schools, some of them count 10, some of them count 20. So, for those teachers, and I guess that's gonna be a district decision, do they drop those down to 10%, or do they drop those down to whatever we come up with an end of course, or how are they doing those in the district, Richie? Because that was never,
Again, as far as looking at courses, I mean, how they count is completely subject to the teacher and the course. And again, the .01 is just a baseline. If a school district wanted to use this and say we want, I mean, they could use it as a final if they wanted to. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, how they use this, or if they want to, instead of make it 20%, they could make it 30%. They could make it 40% or 50%.
yeah.
And they can use this again and we're just looking at what we're requiring, based on, again, presenting my thoughts on that. But districts have a lot of flexibility on that. Again, right now, we know, I mean, this is a federal mandate. They have to take the test. So we did not get a waiver from the test, so that means, we're going to offer the test. But how a district would like to use that, I mean.
So how are you gonna score it?
What do you mean? I mean, we'll run, I mean, DRC.
Same way we've done?
Yeah, DRC will run it. I mean, the kids are gonna have to come in, and typically, we're 100% online, currently. So all the tests will be given, in that format. I think when you look at, having the kids in, they'll take it the way they've always taken it. I mean, as far as the administration of the test, that hasn't changed, at all.
And the scores will be calculated the same way?
Same way, yes.
Well, that's why I was asking about this other waiver, because I think that's, if we take the test, like you're saying, the old way, and we have to calculate it the old way, then we're gonna come out with a number. And I think that is a big concern for our districts and our superintendent, is if it's true of what you were asking in your waiver. Do you agree? Do you think that some kids are not being able to have access to the content like other kids? Are there districts that don't have connectivity? Are there problems in working to ensure that all students are receiving the best education possible? Because, and we know it's not, because there are issues in different larger systems and smaller systems and locations. So if we're giving a test and we're grading it the same way and we're coming out with a number, can we rethink that when we're sending in? I sent you about 2 weeks ago, and I talked to Tiffany something and asked you, what are we gonna do to look at the new waivers that we're sending in? And I know that that's a possibility, and you're looking to do that in February. Are you going to resend some now, since there might be some difference in?
Well, again, I think we were looking at, if there's a possibility of difference in administration.
Right.
To be honest, if we keep the same administration, if, like I said, I'm anticipating a change, but, if we do keep the same administration, US Ed, was very adamant that they've made their decision and said, okay, we live it. I mean, that's why we still have to give the test, so.
No, they said, give a test and give me accountability. I'm saying if it's that way, and we are looking at a waiver, and are you looking at resending another waiver before February?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what the date. Again, I think we're just trying to wait for the certification of the election, and then we can make a final decision.
Okay, well, if we are, can we have this discussion of maybe sending in a waiver that says, can we drop it down? Can we use it more milestones more formatively or prescriptive? Can we drop it down to the districts? Can the accountability be in the districts for once they get the test? Their accountability for us, their contract with us for accountability, what am I going to do to fill in the gaps to make sure that the academics and the resources and the other components, the online learning, what we're finding out from online or this hybrid form or face-to-face, all we're finding, what we're doing to make sure that our kids are going to be back on some road to proficiency. So can we look at that possibility of asking for that waiver, and instead of having to come up with a test and a grade, we can come up with something that says, here's how I am beating the odds, and here's how I'm doing student growth here?
I think what Helen, maybe part of what she's trying to ask.
Maybe I'm not doing a good job.
No, I'm
of
just,
asking.
men are from Mars or Venus, whatever. I mean, we just say things differently sometimes, but I think part of what you're saying, and it's part of what I'm thinking as you're asking it, can we have a discussion before a waiver is submitted to US Ed among the board on something that's going to be asked for us to vote? Can we have a discussion on that, on what that waiver looks like, and not send a waiver to US Ed from your department and then get it or don't get it and come back and say, board, vote on it? Can we have a dialogue and discussion on what that looks like and some input, and try to have consensus if we can, or something even on what it looks like before we, or the Department of Education, which is within your purview, sends it to US Ed and then comes back and then we get it and to vote on it.
What did the board vote on with the last waivers?
Do what?
What did the board vote on regarding the last waivers that we
What you
received
told
from
us.
USAID in March?
Matt, I don't remember.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
again, I look at this, I mean, right now, I think we're talking a little bit, a couple separate things here.
Okay.
Again, just saying, we're talking about EOCs here.
Yeah.
Now, I think that what I'm hearing is a much broader discussion when you look at the K-8 or the 3-8. 3-8 is completely different as we're looking at with this. I think when you look at the dynamics of the high school EOCs, again, as you mentioned, we already have, we have to look at when we're given, and again, we have given flexibility as far as when schools may administer the test itself. Of course, the only concern that I have is the further you get away from taking the content, then that is going to have a part on the student's ability to perform. So if you are a marginal student, then it's probably going to have an impact on your outcome. And again, that throws into the point of, okay, we're looking at retakes, we're looking at other things, or credit recovery with that. As we look, and I know we talked about formative assessment and what that looks like. Now, that creates a brand new waiver about what we're looking at doing. To be honest, we don't really have anything that I would say is a true formative assessment that we have. I mean, even though we have Beacon right now, but it really has not even been tested throughout the full year. And so there are other things that other schools use. Again, as I'm out and about, whether it's MAPS, and other.
Navi.
Well, I mean, even with them, but I'm just saying that typically, things that schools are using for formative, and I'm not talking even about the pilot. I mean, everyone's doing testing right now. High school, again, looks a little bit different than the 3-5 or 3-8 area. So when you begin to talk about waivers and begin to talk about stuff, then I think, that is going to require a little more thought about what can and cannot be done. In high school, and again, Dr. Timberlake, you can, chime in. I mean, so much of what the accountability focuses on is the graduation rate. It is not necessarily the EOC. Within high schools, and I think, Ms. Penny, you mentioned, about testing, and I think, or someone mentioned, I said, most of these classes, they do have a final, okay? They have an additional final. It's probably no different than a lot of your AP classes. You have an AP, exam, but those classes also have a teacher-oriented or generated test. So that's where I think we see, there's testing going on, whether you call it EOC or not. And in some cases, these other tests, they may count a percentage of what's going on. So it may be more, within a certain test. So, I think we can have discussions, but I think trying to, limit the discussion right now to an EOC, because and that's all we're talking about right now is the EOC. We still have to give the milestones, and again, all of this all these tests have to be given. There's no qualms about that. And all we're just talking about the weight and the impact, and its impact on students. And typically, as far as accountability, the EOCs, when we look at it, this is really something that's going to be levied on the student, not teachers or schools. Because typically at high school, we're looking more at graduation rate. CCRPI, again, we very hard. Dr. Timberlake, can you address the calculation of CCRPI this year?
Certainly. I believe the feedback. Our next step, as the superintendent indicated, would be to resubmit the testing and accountability waiver. We submitted last summer in light of the new administration. The Biden administration, by all accounts, will hopefully be a little more amenable to providing some flexibility when it comes to testing and accountability. That said, if they do not provide that, if they do approve that waiver, it's possible we could have flexibility to not give the assessment. It's also possible that they could still require us to give the assessment, but give us flexibility with the accountability. If that's the case, that doesn't mean we don't have to not report anything. We could report data formatively to provide context, to describe what we've seen over the course of the last year and a half with COVID, to help districts understand what's going on and give them benchmark data as they move forward. And to Ms. Rice's point, talk about how they're filling in the gaps and helping students get back to where they need to be in light of their challenges with the pandemic. If the Department of Education doesn't approve that new waiver request, our next steps would be to go request some additional addendums and more targeted waivers to try and get to that model of what I like to call little a accountability this year, where it would be more reporting in context and not the big A accountability where we're trying to calculate overall scores and letter grades and significantly hold people accountable for, challenges in context that was well beyond their control. We would like to proceed with responsible reporting and use of data in light of the pandemic.
Ms. Timberlake, I have a question. Let's say, for example, things play out as you may suggest with regard to us applying for the waivers with a potential new administration. Suppose we've administered EOCs in the fall, and then we get a waiver late spring. And so we're not required to administer the tests per se. What are the mechanics behind something like that, and do you unwind something for fall students if we're able to get that waiver?
That's a very good question. That would play out the same way it did last year. If the board votes to uphold the EOC counting a percentage of student grades for those students that completed courses and took the test and had credit assigned this fall or winter, that would stand. It would just be in the spring we would for additional students, that wouldn't be the case. So I think that's definitely an important consideration.
So I thought it was retroactive, whatever we came up with. Aren't we asking this for this year? For this year?
Yeah, well, I mean,
To be
once the
retro-
test is given, once this administration is given, and again, you can correct me, Dr. Timberlake, once it's assigned, then we cannot retroactively go back. Is that correct?
That's correct. The federal law is requiring that we administer the assessments. The requirement that the EOC count as part of a student's grade is a state law and state board requirement. So that's separate from any waivers the federal government may give us.
I know, but if nothing, we have end of course tests coming up in December, and if nothing is determined, I'm just being hypothetical, if nothing is determined about a percentage, when it is determined at a certain point, all of that goes retroactive back to that test, right?
I think that would be a legal question.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we could necessarily, at one point, I mean, some of it, I know there were some questions I saw about with student finance as well. Once those grades are finalized and sent, then I'm not sure how we necessarily retroactively go back at that point as well.
But when that grade,
From student finance, they want to know what's sent at the end of the year, and
Right.
they do their calculation at the end of the year and then confirm it with the school system. And then my understanding on student finance, even from when we were doing the bill on dual enrollment, is they could basically care less until that semester's out, till the end of the year, and they're issued those final grades, and then they go back and verify and then do their calculation. Verify with the school, and then it becomes.
Martha?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously this discussion shows that flexibility is going to be the key word over the next 6 or 8 months, but it's really not a discussion about the matter at hand, which is what we're trying to talk about. I do see that when you look at these surveys, overwhelmingly the people that we represent are saying they want this ECT test to count a very low level. And if I understood what you said, Superintendent Woods, is that this is a minimum. This is just a suggestion that school systems can count it more if they want to. This is just the minimum. You know, I feel very strongly that we've got to consider the things like you talked about related to Hope Scholarship, things like that, that there's a whole package here that we're going to have to revisit on a regular basis because of COVID. You know, I think that some of the discussions we're having here right now are things that we're going to be dealing with on a monthly basis all the way through and really don't pertain to the motion that we're considering right now.
Do we
Well,
have a
for the sake
motion?
of discussion, actually, I respectfully disagree with that in this regard. Is I think it has everything to do with it, because part of the argument for not having a test that's significant and significantly weighted is effects it could have on kids for Hope Scholarship. And that's really to the root of why I'm asking some of the questions I am, because as a kid who had to borrow money to go to school, and as a parent who's now, thank you, Jesus, she just finished her last semester of college and now just has one semester that has paid for 2 college tuitions now. Hope Scholarship matters, and more so to other families than mine. And for those kids that are on the bubble, what flexibility or what other bites at the apple, so if it were to potentially harm a child and put them right on the bubble because they didn't have the opportunity to get the information they needed to do well on the test, what flexibility is afforded to that parent, that teacher, and that student to go back and help rectify that situation?
But I think that's what we're trying to do in reducing the weighting of this test, is to give that flexibility. And I still don't buy the argument. I mean, and I did vote for the 10% because the measure that I put forward didn't win. So I voted for that. But I still don't buy the argument that kids aren't going to take the test seriously if it's not weighted 10%. I just don't buy it. Kids that are taking these kind of classes are going to take it seriously. The teachers are going to take it seriously because it's a good measure. So, I just think I think we have to have a little more faith in what our school systems are doing than, trying to micromanage every final detail they're going to have, based on from this board. We have a responsibility on this board. There's no doubt about it. But I think what I heard from the superintendent is he's trying to give flexibility to the school systems because, Lord knows, I said it back in March, the first time we had to talk about COVID. I've said it every single month. The big cost of all of this is going to be our children. We think it's the deaths, and every death has been a tragedy, no doubt about it. But I have grandchildren that are young grandchildren in school, and they are falling behind. And their parents have resources and ability to bring tutors in to help and do all that kind of stuff, the pods and all of that. But my grandchildren are falling behind in reading. They are falling behind, and we're helping every way we can. But flexibility is the key going forward because, we've got to allow our school systems, we've got to trust our districts and our superintendents to be able to bubble up from them the good ideas, not down from us the good ideas.
I think that was what I was trying to present in a way too. And I don't think that when you have a good discussion, and I don't think when you collaborate, which we should do, is trying to micromanage anyone. I think when you're not given not brought to the table, not brought along, and when you get to the table and say, here's the cake, blow out the candles, that's micromanaged. I think we have a responsibility as a constitutional board to do what we can the best for the students in the state, and that is working and collaborating with DOE. But we all are in this partnership together, and we have to come together to do it, to make good decisions. And when you ask for something and it's delayed in getting something, you're not asking to micromanage. I'm asking because I want to have the knowledge to be able to make a good decision.
Exactly.
I think that's like everybody else. And I think, Richard, that if we could come together a little bit more and discuss things a little bit more. We definitely don't want to do your job, but we want to be sure that we are understanding. Like if we had not discussed this today, I would not have known that this got out on the 8th, because I've had people ask me about the TEKS issue. So it helps to come together and work together. And I wish that there wouldn't be such a guard up feeling like that when things are asked for, there's an unintended consequence. It's not in my heart, and I don't think it's in anybody else's heart, but to do what's good for the students of this state. And the only way we can do what is the best for the students is for us to have good discussion, good communication, and pull together and come up with what we think is best. Is .01, you said the districts could make another choice, so what were the districts saying to you would be a compromise or a better choice?
I mean, the people, again, the individuals that I talked to, I mean, everyone, without a doubt, has agreed with the position of the .01. And I've been throughout the state, north, south, east, west. Now, if there are other people out there, and again, that's fine. My thing is that trying to present this, and the reason, again, you know, we started with the waiver of no test. I felt that was the strongest, you know, and the best place we needed to be due to what we're facing with. I mean, currently right now, I mean, one thing about the EOC's test, it does not care about COVID-19. It's going to be given at a certain time. You have to take that test. Now, when you talk about equity throughout the state, one thing you have to look at is that school systems have started different. I mean, some school systems, they have lost 4 to 6 weeks of time. You have had schools, and again, I mean, I was supposed to visit Walker County this week. They shut down. I was supposed to visit Cook County on Friday. They shut down. Now, again, what we're dealing with in another school is that you've had kids go in and out of quarantine. 14 days, back in, 14 days. But the test has got to be given, and the date is set. Now, again, we can talk about this, but I'm just trying to look at an equity standpoint. You talk about all these kids that are out there, and they're looking at hope. They're looking at, you know, whatever scholarships that are out there. To say that everyone has a fair shot or an equal shot would be a misstatement. I think resources, I mean, depending what school system you're at, you're able to do some things, and some schools definitely can't. Now, I think, again, talking about formative and stuff like that, you know, we're just trying, and all, you know, what is being asked is that a year that we look at this year. But that being said, these kids, you know, you got to look at that who is being, and again, maybe not using the word punish, but who is being hit or dinged this year with the EOCs, and that's kids. Now, again, for myself as a teacher, as I shared, these kids are having finals. I mean, they're going to take something. And I think that for myself, and again, I speak for an educator, if my kid's not prepared, then I'm not going to pass that kid, okay? I mean, because I know, I mean, especially I'm thinking that one of the EOCs we're looking at, you're taking, you know, algebra. Algebra pretty well opens up that door to wherever you want to go past that. So it's in a pretty important course, biology as well. And I think trying to look and put faith in myself, again, just thinking if I can give a kid a full year with a teacher, that's the best thing I think we can do. Now, also one of the things we look at is that, you know, we talk about equity is this virtual. And I'm just telling you, this virtual stuff is all over the place.
Yeah.
That is where, and again, going back, I mean, I've instructed the members of the department to look, we got to begin looking at summer. I mean, we're talking about credit recovery, talking about makeup. I said, you know, this pandemic, I wish I could say that we could catch up and move up with that, but it's going to linger with us. Now, can I tell you how much? I don't know. I think one of the things we look at, and again, as we, you know, we'll probably begin to find out, for those kids, and roughly about, and again, I just use this on average, we probably have about 70% of our kids have been face-to-face. Now, how much of that time has been face-to-face depends on start dates. And how much of that time depends on have you been affected by quarantines and things of that nature. And so I think as we look ahead, I'm just trying to think of the most equitable and fair way that we can deal with this this year. Now, again, there are other things that we have to address. Today, again, is EOC, so I'm just trying to limit to what we are speaking about EOCs. And we're talking, a limited number of courses right now, all important. But I think that, other courses are just as important. I'm thinking if I'm taking welding, that's a pretty important class for me if I'm doing that. There's no EOC on there. But these are things that we have to look at that I firmly believe that our teachers are doing the very best they're doing. When I'm talking with our principals and I mean, they're being tested as much as they possibly can to find out. And to be honest, that first month of school, wherever I went, we were trying to find out where the kids were. I mean, that was just trying to find a baseline, at this. High school, again, looks a little bit different. And, with the EOCs, trying to be as equitable and fair as we possibly can. I think districts are going to have to make, some calls. And we're trying to find out how do we support that. But, as I said, I think that the virtual stuff, that is the area of most concern that I have. And because we are in and we are out, and like I said, I got a list of school districts that have just recently closed down. And I'm trying, I think with this, the intent was to give at least some stability, offer some things that we could say we've settled, it's on the table, and let's let districts focus on what they need to focus on. And again, like I said, it's not an easy decision. This is, it's like I tell her, but this is the lives of kids. So, that's kind of where we're at with that, with the EOCs right now.
Okay,
Go ahead, Helen, finish up.
On the 160-4-2-.113, the statewide passing score, it says the Georgia Milestone End of Course shall be used as the final exam in the courses assessed by Georgia Milestone End of Course. Georgia Milestone End of Course reports shall provide parents, students, and educators with individual scores on the end of course taken. Student scores must be recorded on, in, or with the individual student report card. So this end of course is a final exam. We have other teachers that are teaching final exams. This one has a 20%. It was knocked down to 10. Your request was 0.01. So we're having to determine if we say it in law that it's reported like this, and the individual student report card is going to be recorded. And we're worried about the 95% rule of students taking it. That's part of that waiver. And we're concerned about the inequality of content for students. And we're concerned about the fact that across our state, we're not connected fairly for students. And we're concerned about the poverty and trauma and all these other things that are affecting kids. I'm trying to figure, Richard, is 0.01, is that the score for the final exam, or is it somewhere compromised? And I'm just going through things that people have said to me.
I think you mean weight, not score.
I'm sorry, weight. Is there a compromise between that you feel is fair and wouldn't put students at, what was your word, Mike?
I've said a bunch of them.
No, the one when I said we're trying to, repercussions.
It would be punitive against students.
Yeah, don't want to be punitive.
Right.
Thank you, Ken, you're here.
Thank you. So I guess that's our discussion that Martha is saying. Where is this and what is it? Huh? Or, yeah. And 80-something%, but we know when those tests, when those surveys go out, they go out with a certain way that it's written. Do you support? Nobody said, do we support what would teachers and principals and parents think is a fair score for an end-of-course test if TEKS were not a factor and students were, it wasn't punitive to them either. So I'm just trying to come up with where is that fair margin on And like I said, leadership was survey, but sometimes you and I know how surveys can come out and how they're sent out. And the first one definitely was sent out after, that vote. And I'm sensitive to that, and I'm sensitive to the way you feel. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying where is that, I guess, balance? And is that the balance? Is it down here, or is it somewhere in between? Does somewhere in between say, there's a little bit of merit here? Because if I'm teaching a class and I'm giving a final test and it's 10%, nobody's worried about my 10%. They were only worried about the end of course 10%. Same thing on the student. If you can't pass it and makes a bad grade, the same thing. I don't know, I'm just struggling, so I'm asking for help.
Helen, in your defense, there are a lot of struggles. We've got absolutes, we've got variables, and we need an outcome. And the question has been posed, how do we get to that outcome? How do we get to the best outcome? How do we get to the fair outcome, the balanced outcome, all of those words? How do we get there? And what is the answer? We have an equation with a lot of variables and a few absolutes.
I agree. And a teacher will say, well, I don't teach one of the end of course tests, and when I give my final, it counts 10%. And I'm thinking, well, why am I going to be? There's feels an inequality there. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, Richard. I'm just asking for help.
Well, you think about the
Ms.
fact-
Rice, can you hear me?
I can. Preach to me.
David Mosley, can y'all hear me?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
If you need some help, let me try to give you some.
Oh, brother.
I think the best help that we can give our school districts, superintendents, teachers, parents, and staff now is to be totally supportive of this recommendation, because overwhelmingly they have voted throughout the state, and I know my superintendents here were unanimous in their support of the superintendent's recommendation. And I think of all times in our society today, particularly as it relates to education, that we need to provide as much flexibility as possible to our school districts and be supportive and sort of, let them wade through this pandemic with our support, our help, our guidance, and our prayers, but stay out of the way of the nuts and bolts of how they're going to do it. And I'd ask that, all my fellow board members think about this and consider it very seriously.
Thank you very much, Butch. Mr. Long, again, I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everybody hear me?
No.
Yo, volume. Sometimes an adult ADD mind is a beautiful place to be. You have time to think. And the word I want to focus on is time. I said, so time has also been, to me, an asset for me and a detriment for me on this whole subject, EOC, because it's given me time to meet with a lot of people. It's given me time to get a lot of input. It's given me time to get a lot of soul searching and thoughts myself. The info gathering that has taken place in this time, and I'll give it to you as an asset, because it gave me the time to gather the information I need to make a proper and appropriate decision in my heart for my folks or where I'm at. The detriment of that is the kicking of the can further down the road. Because my understanding was, and I'm going to skip to note number 4, I thought this was retro. I thought it's okay once we finish in December of 2020, and we get this, because if we have to post again, time comes into play, and we have to go back retro. So I would love clarification on that in a minute. But I think what we're also got to remember this, as again, like Butch just said, it's such a tumultuous year, and we've never been in, but we've got to look at what's going to happen in remediation. We've got to look at how we catch these kids up, because this group of kids, Mr. Allen, you said a great point last night. This group of kids, we're going to look at them in a 10-year study down the road. Where are they going to be in crime? Where are they going to be in anything else? So my passion leads towards the time that we're putting into this decision is to make the proper decision is appropriate, but it's also something we can't afford to push down the road much further, simply because we can't afford to have a group of students in a 2020, 2021 graduate class, some be scored on one scale, some be scored on another. So I think part of my issue is that, and some of the best part of my information gathering is to hear superintendents and directors of recess, et cetera, saying, I sat next to a very passionate one night. Again, I think I counted 51 that I've spoken to. And Butch, I'll agree with you, disagree with you. My district is completely different. I have 2 recesses in my district, and it was not overwhelming. We have some that are still going 30%. They said, we're going to hold them to the fire for 30%. We have some 10s, and we have some 20s, and we have some 001s. Very, very mixed. But I think my point is we need to look at it as a state. We need to look at it as the best decision we can make. But the time that it's taken has been such a clarifying factor for me, again, because it gives you time to make a decision that is wholly based, factually based, and not just a passionate decision, if that makes sense. So,
Yes.
it made me, again, because there's been so many people worried about the teaks and leaks part of this. And it's like, I'm going to be penalized because these scores are going to come out. These districts are going to be penalized. But I feel the reassurance, I'm going to go back and use your word, that we're trusting our people to do that. And also the fact that if you've got somebody that's telling me, said, we're still doing observations, we're still doing in-class monitoring, we're still giving them recommendations, this is how we do it. These are weird times, but this is how we're doing it in our classroom right now. So that nutshell for me, again, I was called out for not getting the information timely ahead of the last meeting. But I can tell you this, the time has actually been helpful for me, but I also can see where moving forward, time can be a detriment to this as well.
And
So
Mike, to your point too, and you and I talked about this, and it was, the fact is that the superintendent's recommendation at .01 is a floor, and districts have always had the flexibility to make that number whatever they want to be, but we're giving that flexibility from a reduced number to 20 to 10 to whatever the number may end up being. So districts will have that flexibility. I think that's very, very important to keep under consideration as well.
again, Scott, you and I mentioned this as well about the last motion that was made last month, and I really think if there had been a caveat, it would have gained more traction at that time if it was with clarification of the fact that it could be a base of 10 or whatever you'd like it to be. But that's what I mean. There was no clarification at that point. So then again, if you put your base at 001, then it gives the flexibility for those to do as they wish. So.
Yeah, so, and to your point, I've spoken with superintendents. Some superintendents are fine at 20%, and the reason they were fine at 20% was because they were back in face-to-face education on day one with 100% or a large portion of their student body, and he said, what is applicable to me is not necessarily applicable to other systems. And for many of the reasons that we cited, whether it's hybrid models, whether it's virtual, whether it's late starts, whether it's quarantine periods, we're hearing about school systems that are shutting down now. Some of these school systems may shut down not just through Thanksgiving, but beyond the Christmas holidays and not come back to school until January. I'm starting to hear those kinds of rumors as well. One of the things, and I'm just going to cite one of the districts in my congressional district, the DeKalb County school system. They're still not in face-to-face education. All right. So from an administration standpoint of the EOCs, how is that going to happen? Okay. I just don't know. Okay, and so the ability for us, and we've heard about the ESSA requirements, 95%. There's no way we're going to hit that number. Okay, that's a given. We've heard about peaks. With regard to CCRPI, my understanding, I mean, we basically, a lot of that, and as far as growth measurements are concerned, we already gave waivers on the milestones last year. All right, so we don't have a baseline as far as growth is concerned. All right, so that's a challenge. One of the things that we're talking about most importantly is weight, the weight of this test. But there's a big difference between weight and content. Okay, the fact is students are still going to be able to take the test and be measured on content. All right, so we'll have that information for those students that are able to take it. But I do have another question, and this is in regards to, students that are unable to take the test. okay? So if they're not willing to come in and we're not self-administering through a private proctor, for example, at somebody's home, is that an incomplete? I mean, I don't know the answer to that question. How is that going to be framed?
But I think, again, Dr. Timberlake on that, if you do not take the test, you have the option, I think that typically it would be recorded as a 0 or an incomplete, is that correct? And it's such.
Yes, our district would be able to offer an incomplete. Typically, they have a short amount of time to complete the EOC requirement to replace it as part of the grade. The biggest concern for me among all of this is this situation where we still have thousands and tens of thousands of students who are doing remote instruction, whether it's because their district isn't open, because they're quarantining, or because they choose to do that. And as long as the EOC continues to carry some percentage of student grades, we are asking them to make a decision between their health and their grade. And for me, that's kind of the overarching thing for me that would lead me to make one decision over the other in this case.
Yeah.
I believe we still have a lot of people.
All right, Mr. Allen, I think you had some questions.
I did, sir. I think we've got some. Could everyone please mute their mic that's virtual? I've got white noise or something. And that being said, I beg the board's patience while I try to articulate what is in my heart, honestly. And to Ms. Zoller and the superintendent's credit, I agree with many of your points, and I in no way would ever think of questioning your reasons or your heart or your desire for the children of Georgia, or accuse you of blocking our progress in doing so. Our purpose is to educate the children of Georgia. That is why we exist. We're not able to do that this year as effectively as we want. To Martha's point, I have a sophomore in high school myself. It is a far cry from what the education she should be getting. We're trying our best. I am not in any way impugning the system, the educators, the administrators, the great teachers, and all the educators of Georgia. We are trying. Let's be honest, the truth is they're not going to get the education they deserve this year. It's just not going to happen. In person, hybrid, virtual, whatever. What is the purpose of the end of course test? That's an actual question. What is the purpose of the end of course test? It's to measure how much we've educated those children. How much have we as a state, as a body, and as the local boards fulfilled their obligation to educating our children? It's a measure for that. Who is doing it right? Who is doing a better job at trying to educate Georgia's children? Who is doing a worse job? What is the different approaches they're taking? What are the best practices that we can learn from? How do we know the difference? How do we know? How do we know who's doing a good job? How do we know who's not doing a good job? With all due respect to everyone here, I do disagree, Ms. Zoller, with your statement. I know for a fact, I've spoken to various pupils, students, high schoolers of every rank and file. Those struggling, my daughter included, actually think that it gives them an opportunity to gain ground. Very few people are better test takers. My daughter may be one. I've spoken to middle-of-the-road students, average students, that they know that it needs to count, or they just don't see a purpose to it. They're just not going to try because they're not motivated. And I've spoken to 4.3 students looking to get a scholarship to Georgia Tech, hoping that they're going to be an engineer. And they have a lot more important things to do than study for a test that they know is not going to count for anything. They told me. They were very, very direct with me.
Why would I? I am studying everything else I can. Why am I going to worry about a test that counts for nothing? To your point, sir, we have to take the test. It's indisputable. It has been decided we have to spend $17 million. We have to take this test. USAID has spoken. I believe that those tests must have weight for validity. I sincerely believe that. I believe, to clarify my colleague, Mr. Long, what I stated last night was my concern about the literacy, about the fact that we have backslid now 2 semesters in a row, ending last year and this year's semester. And as you said, Superintendent, we have no idea where this will end. We know very well, it has been drilled into us that if you are not reading on a 3rd grade level, by 3rd grade, there is over a 95% chance you may not graduate. When I was speaking of that last night, when I mentioned to Mr. Long that if that's the case, you can set your watch that 10 years from now, today's 2nd and 3rd graders, the illiteracy rate will be so high, and unless for another time, maybe there is an argument, there must be an argument. We must not fail in finding a way for remediation and improvement. But right now, we need to make sure that we're aware of where we stand. And I was actually, I believe, misquoted in a couple of articles about our last meeting. I never said that this would have value in relation to last year or any other comparable study. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. I believe this is a standalone snapshot of how we have dealt with this crisis. I've spoken to many superintendents, teachers. I was at GSSA. A large number of the ones that I spoke to are in favor of 10%. And I will remind everyone, I am a lifelong licensed arbitrator mediator. I'm an ADR certified specialist. The 10% is a compromise. I mean, I think we tend to forget that because it's not zero, that we're not trying to find middle ground. The 10%, I chose the 10% simply because it was the middle of 20 and 0. I mean, it wasn't a complicated equation. It was also given to me by 2 superintendents in my district as a recommendation. One of those that is not in my district, but another superintendent that I spoke to is Alan Fort, whom most of us know in Tolliver County, that I believe the smallest county, or the smallest system in Georgia. Alan, I was very desperate to get his point of view, and I called him several times, and he finally returned my call, not because he was busy or delayed, but because he cannot get a cell signal in his school, much less broadband, and his entire county is virtual. Figure that out. 80% of the county doesn't have internet. The school itself can't even get a cell signal, but they're a virtual school, virtual system. Mr. Fort thinks 10% is necessary. I did not lobby him. I asked with an open mind and an open heart for his recommendation, and he gave me 10%. And he did so because he feels that we must hold the systems to some level of accountability. Maybe not all accountability, something possibly that can be adjusted, something possibly that we can look at tweaking. There's 90% of the grade would still be left for them to work with, but he believes that we as a body, as a state body, trust the local districts, but it is our job as an oversight board to also offer guidance and some outlines. And quite honestly, as ugly as he believes his exams are going to be ugly. He thinks his tests are going to be terrible for all the reasons I just gave you. But it'll shine a light on the struggles that he's had. It'll shine a light on the struggles that rural Georgia has had, not to get off subject, but with rural broadband and the things that we have been working towards and promising for a long time. he actually believes it will do good. It will bring about a positive result. All that being said, I truly do want what is best for our children, and I don't think there's anyone in this room that doesn't. My personal belief is that there must be accountability for validity. I can give you my own personal experiences talking to the various, I can name the superintendents, the teachers, the educators, the administrators, but there's no sense in getting into a laundry list. We all have them. I will tell you that as early as late as yesterday, I had a high school teacher from one of my systems call me and say, you know, it's really amazing that our graduation rate went up last year. Why is that amazing? I said, well, she said, well, because I don't really know that there was a whole lot of rigor there that second semester that would have caused it to go down. That was a teacher calling me, reaching out to me. I did not, someone that I barely know, actually. I did not reach out to her or ask for her opinion. She called me because she knew we were having a meeting this week. Lastly, and this is one of my favorite quotes, and I'll just leave that. I do value immensely the input of our educators throughout Georgia in that survey and through all the feedback we had, through the meetings I had at GSSA, through the private meetings I've had individually, the phone conversations. Our charge is different than the teachers and the parents and the administrators that answered a lot of those questions. Our charge is a wider scope. The reason this board exists, the reason that we are a body made up of a myriad of different people, different professions, different beliefs, is to offer that wider scope. We're not all teachers, we're not all educators, we're not all educators, but we all have our own points of view that together as a body, we can offer a wider point of view and a wider scope to the education of Georgia. Edmund Burke said that a representative owes you not his industry only, but his opinion, or his, now, wow, I'm sorry, it's my favorite one. Not his industry only, but his judgment. And he betrays you instead of serves you if he sacrifices it to your opinion. I believe that we are representatives of our districts. I believe that we're representatives of the children, parents, teachers of Georgia. And I believe that in each of us, we have to find our own reasons and our own answers to how we address this. There are no easy ones. So you were absolutely right, Mr. Woods. This is not an easy answer. But I believe that we need to do our best, and that is my belief and my stance.
Well, again, the only thing I'd look at, I mean, we can talk about that, but I just want to reinforce it in the day we are giving a test. That test is going to be given. We are going to receive scores, good, bad, wherever. I think that as we look at these scores, and if some have said our kids won't take it serious, that is going to reflect on what goes on. And I think that my comfort level, and as a teacher and as a student, I never sacrifice doing my very best. Now, I think it is imperative that as a teacher, I always encourage, because I was giving tests that when we started graduation tests, and when I started with the courses I was given, the U.S. history, it was not a requirement, but it was a test. My kids did very well, and I think you have to have that self-motivation. That, again, I think that as we look at that, to say, what if it does come back and it says, are we going to get a true representation? I don't know. We've got kids right now, again, as we look at with our 95% rule, I don't know how many kids are not going to show up and take a test. I don't know, what that is going to look like. That has an impact. Again, as I've shared, and again, to every superintendent, to every teacher, whatever, this is the baseline. Some have mentioned you can use this and you can you can set that as you want to, you know. And I would encourage everyone, I said, you know, to our teachers and our superintendents, and again, one thing I have found out, and again, as spoken, no one is sacrificing and no one is trying to just get through. But they are giving their very best. These kids are giving their very best. To me, it's always been that if I have a teacher inside the classroom, I have accountability. I mean, to me, teachers have always made that difference. It is very hard right now with this virtual and things that there. And again, that, you know, the intent is trying to be, how can you be as equitable as possible during this time? Like that, this is, again, I go back, you're right, this is a challenging time. I hope it's, you know, that we'd never see another pandemic in our lifetime. But I think trying to look at this, to be equitable, be fair, to support all of our children as best we can, and to provide some stability, and just say, listen, this is where we need to focus on, because, you know, as I shared, I mean, we are all over the board. We have lost 4, we've lost 6 weeks. The test itself, I mean, it's not there, but I do want to emphasize, I do believe that our teachers know where their kids are. And I do not think, at least I would say for myself as an educator, I would never just pass a kid just to pass a kid. And I think that, you know, we still have to look at, this is a test given a year. 20%, you know, whatever you want to make it. But I do trust that the teacher who has had that child for an entire year, in whatever format that they are in and have been in, that I do believe that they are going to make the best judgment for their children. And I think they would offer a big disservice if they just passed a child just to pass a child. Because this content does matter, as I shared. I mean, all these courses they look at, I mean, it builds and it supplements. And to be honest, if the children, if they don't get it, and if they don't retain it, and again, that's, again, a lot of times what you find out is that you have a test, and then after that test, it goes. It is more critical that a child knows and retains that material, not just to pass a test and then move on, because this will build on what they knew. And if these kids, if they don't know the content, I mean, it will catch up with them. And it is the job of that next teacher. And I think that it is the job, again, when you look at that, you know, once these tests are given, if they do not try and do not do well or whatever, then, you know, I think that those school districts have to look at. And they have to look at, maybe I need to remediate those kids. So I would not encourage any child to do poorly, because that does send a signal. And I think for any district, it would behoove them that if they have found out that their kids are not passing, that there has to be some remediation. There has to be some retake. And that is something that is completely in their purview as well. And I think for us, as the DOE, we are trying to offer and support these children as we move on. But, you know, I don't want to, you know, belabor the point, and, you know, and I think, you know, everybody knows where I feel. My stance is what it is. I respect everything that's been said, but I'm just trying to make the argument of what I believe is best for the children at large in the state of Georgia. Like I said, I'm an educator. I grew up an educator. I know what it's like to be a teacher. And I never, ever sacrificed my integrity or the expectations that went in. And that was before we had tests, before we had anything. And I just, like I said, my belief is in the teachers of the state of Georgia. Not a test given once a year, but it's in the teachers who deal with these children each and every day. And I'm just trying to give them the fairness and give them the support that I believe that they need at this time. Like I said, this is crazy. I mean, it is. And to be out there and about, it you know, just is. But like I said, I don't want to just ramble on.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Long, go ahead.
Just also be cognizant of the fact, and I just brought up about the mobile audiology unit. That's not what I wanted to say, but I do recognize the fact that it is 3:30 and that was our time. I do. You just absolutely, you set it up and you confirmed it. The note I wrote down here, and I think it's something I can look at you and I can look at Matt and I can look at and everybody and Allison, all the folks that are listening, and especially the local districts and whatnot. It's going to be a challenge. I put it down. I challenge the DOT and the locals to start planning now. I said, we've got to start planning for the end now. I mentioned remediation. You mentioned remediation. I really think that we're focusing on EOCT, but at the end, we really need to be focused on how we get caught up. And I think no matter what the decision would be, I think that's where I'm going to challenge everybody here to go ahead and start planning for the end now. Hopefully, it will be sooner. And so when we get to the point where we have our decision, and we leave that flexibility for the districts to go if you want to go higher than 0.01, whatever it might be, whatever we've come to the conclusion. But I think we really need to start focusing on remediation now. Start saying, where can we be if we think X amount of time is going to lapse and we need to catch this class up. It would be a challenge that I put out to all the systems now to go ahead and start looking at the end game. And just remediation, what you talked about, sir. Yes, sir. Anyway.
That's what I was talking about, opening the meeting. We need to be talking about how we can give flexibility to these schools, whether it's through rule, law, whatever, in that.
But again, for most of the schools that we're talking about are those in the block schedule right now. I mean, for 6-7 period day, that means it'll be at the end of the year, when they take the EOC. But right now, this is typically where we're at.
So that is my question, because I left here our last board meeting knowing that the .01 was what you recommended, but that the school systems had the flexibility if they wanted it to be larger. I feel like I'm in the minority with that, but I left here with that day. My question is that the 10% is what we decided on that day, so if we're past the point of no return, if we can't do retroactive on these EOCs for these kids who are on block schedule that are going to be taking these tests in the next 30 days, possibly next week, are at a point where there is no option if we're going to lower it? Does it have to be the 10%? Do we? If we have to do 30 days again?
Right now, it's 20.
Well,
Right.
I think you're asking a point of order type question, and I asked legal that, and I got an answer on Monday, and the answer to your question is yes. What was posted is what we have to vote on.
Right.
And if we vote that down, anything we change would have to be posted for 30 days.
And then we're past the ones that are on block scheduling and taking the EOC, and the test cannot be retroactively.
So really, to boil it down, as somebody just did, and actually a little bit of the sidebar, I apologize that Scott and I are having, is really this boils down to what's our floor. What are we saying the floor is, and if we vote for 10%, the floor is 10%, and the districts that want 20, Mike's got one that's 30. We're really debating on what the floor of the EOC is.
But Ms. Petty, it can be, y'all have latitude to decide that for this meeting. We can still do the 30 days if you decide to do a change past 10%. We could do the 30 days because districts just need to know on the back end of the semester how much the EOC is going to be worth. They don't have to know before EOCs are given how much the EOC is.
Kids going in need to know, parents and kids, teachers.
So it is retroactive.
No, it's just that.
Our system finishes now and has a deal, which I've already had some already had to take it. If we make that decision and it changes again and we put 30 days and we have to decide something completely different, is that going to absorb those kids that have already taken it?
Since y'all are making it in December, because that would be our December, probably a called board meeting, then it would still impact that semester of students, because their course grades wouldn't be done until that end of that semester.
They'd have to go
So it
back
would still have
and
an opportunity. Past that, it couldn't be retroactive. So say in April or May, y'all decide to want to go back and change it, you couldn't do
But to your point, it is in a way retroactive because they will have already completed the test and it will be retroactive after they took the test, but not retroactive to the
From a
final grade.
from a mindset standpoint, because no rule has been adopted, right now it's 20%. Okay, so that should be the mindset of a student that's going in to take the test. So again, as Mike was saying, or Mr. Royal was saying, is that what we're looking at is a floor, determining what that floor will be, more so than anything else. Ms. Petty, are you finished?
Yes.
Helen, did you have anything else? Mr. Allen, do you have anything else?
We can amend the motion though, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
just procedurally.
Mr. Chairman, quick question.
Yes, Kenneth? Go ahead.
When do schools determine the ceilings? When would they determine the ceilings if we're determining the floor? When is that? How is that process done?
I'm going to defer your question to the Godot representatives.
And your question, Kenneth, I was having a little bit of a hard time. When do districts determine what they're going to count, what the ceiling is, whether they keep it at 20? And I guess they would have to do that by board. And so if their board meetings are done or not over and they don't take any board action in between there, and it's still 20.
I would say at this time, I mean, across the board, currently it is 20%. Okay, there's no negotiation on that until something were to change. Now, if a school system already has 30 or 40, whatever percent, I dare say I don't think anybody would be changing necessarily at the 11th hour here locally with that.
But as soon as the board approves, the local board could set higher than that, if that wasn't already higher.
Or keep it at 20. Right now, everybody knows it's 20, or if it's been set at some previous thing.
All right, I guess for clarification, but the item to vote on tomorrow is the 10%.
So we have a recommendation, and it is a recommendation from the State Board of Education that you have before you. You should have received it in your packet, okay? And that basically is, in a nutshell, it's reducing the EOC weight from 20% to 10%.
Oh, yeah.
So tomorrow, I mean, that is the motion that will be offered. Now, you know, we're looking for a first then, we're looking for a second, we're looking for some level of discussion. And if there is anybody that wishes to amend that recommendation, we have to entertain that as an amendment, okay? And so if there is let's say somebody just said, I want to make it 25%. Let's say somebody wants to make it 5%. We got to figure out what that is, and you pretty much need to limit it to one amendment. You can't do amendment. It gets way too confusing, all right? So there's an amendment, and then basically we either give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on an amendment, or we're giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down if there's no amendment. I mean, it's really that simple, okay? So the reason I wanted to have this is to, like I said, lay all cards on the table face up. We have a lot to think about. I mean, this is, as I said at the onset, I think this is the weightiest decision that we are contemplating this year. I have grave concerns relative to the administration of these tests and how they're going to be administered. And I use DeKalb County as an example. DeKalb County is not in face-to-face education today, so how are they going to administer face-to-face tests? APS. We have other schools, and then we have the prospect of a new administration and waivers that may be requested, okay? And if they're granted, I mean, how does, you're basically having two different buckets. So that's another thing to take into consideration. We've talked about floors, we've talked about late school start dates. Many school systems didn't even start on time, so we're talking about compressed timelines. Trey, to your information, you know, we're talking about knowledge. The tests still will measure knowledge. I mean, in college, I had finals that were weighted 100%. You can bet that I took that serious, okay? But the test didn't measure my seriousness. The test measured my knowledge. And that's what I'm looking at, is that we are still going to be able to capture the knowledge that students have for those students that are taking the test. I don't know what magic number is that we create a certain weight that says students are compelled to take it or not. I don't know that number. I don't know what that is. We've already covered the ESSA requirements. We covered TEKS. We've covered CCRPI. We've covered baselines as far as growth is concerned. With regard to scholarship, HOPE, Zell, college university programs, ROTC programs, and third-party scholarships and so forth, you received some information by email that kind of covered how The Public Finance Commission looks at some of these matters, so I encourage you to read that if you have not already. At the end of the day, the weight does have an impact as far as scholarship eligibility, which I think is important. We've talked about contents, must offer tests. We've talked about incompletes. We've talked about 0%. We talked about failing and taking the test again. I'm just going through my checklist and everything else. Are there any other questions or comments? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share your concern on the logistics of all this, because that's a huge problem, the administration of the test. And whether or not it counts for 0.01% or whatever number, if you don't show up, you're incomplete or zero, right? So that's not answered by the weight of this test. I mean, we know that ESSA says this has got to be a proctored test, and it's got to be administered. So that's a separate argument that I hope we can brainstorm to help districts solve that problem, because what we're talking about today on a percentage isn't going to solve that problem. Students have to go and they have to show. They have to show up and have to do it. And so, and I appreciate the survey. Because it proves something. It was 87 of 93,000. Y'all, some of y'all have been, Martha, you've been around polling and politics as long as I have, and I'll tell you, what it proved to me is if you can frame the question and you can direct it to an audience, not limit it, but direct it to an audience you intend to get to, you can come out with a result that you intend to have in the end. And that's what I read the survey. That's what I get from that survey. If you're going to ask if you have control of that question and you direct it to people that you want to answer, then you will get the result you intend. We're talking here about the floor of 0.01 or 10% or nothing passes. It'll be 20 and we all know it. And I can't divine, nor can you, I cannot divine whether or not a possible new administration will, make accountability a thing of the past, frankly. I know when Georgia had no accountability, we had this graduation rates in like the 60s, right?
Yep.
That's right.
So accountability must work. It must help students take things seriously, and educators, but especially students take things seriously, because we've got a graduation rate, and congratulations to this department and to teachers and educators and administrators all over this state that it's never been higher than in the history of our state, and we can be proud of it. But it wasn't because we had no accountability. And I can't divine whether a new administration might reduce or eliminate accountability. I would fundamentally disagree with them if they did. But as we have been told and said before, elections have consequences. But we've got to know where our students are academically. And we've got to know the damage that's been done by a pandemic. A pandemic that's it's a historic occurrence. And I hope that we all live a long time, and none of us ever have to experience something like we've experienced in the last year. But it's not over, right? It's unfortunately, and we're still feeling the effects of it. But we have to know, and to do that, we have to account, and we have to take things seriously, and we have to trust our educators. I totally agree with that. I trust the people that work for me and with me, and we verify those things constantly. We verify the work that they do, I do, and everybody in my sphere of influence in every way, especially in our company. We account for it. We trust one another. We love one another. We work together. We call ourselves a family in my company because it's like a family. But you know what? We also hold each other accountable. And education is not an exception of that. It is just, has to be. In fact, it maybe more so than a lot of things requires accountability because we want what's best for our kids. We want to know they're getting the best. And we can't leave that up to chance, and we can't leave it up to whether I trust or you trust or a parent trusts a teacher, because they should be able to, because but they're humans like the rest of us at the same rate. So I know one thing one simple aspect, one simple thing that I have learned in life, in business, and in every aspect of my life: what gets measured gets done. What gets measured gets done. It gets taken seriously, and it gets applied. People apply themselves if they're being held to a standard, to a metric, to a measure. And people will say, if we don't go to point 01, there's people that get to point, that's a heartless bunch of folks there that met on the 20th floor on, but it's tomorrow. 20th, I don't know.
19th.
That's a heartless bunch of folks, and there are people that are gonna, and there are people in associations and alphabets, and they're gonna say but keep in mind, this will be cutting that accountability in 50% to 50%. Not to zero, but to 50%. That's not heartless. And people will point out and say, there'll be people in associations, establishmentarian associations, that will say it is. And there'll be people, maybe among us, that will say it was. But I can live with that. And I don't, if I had to take a survey, and listen, I've talked to people in my district and outside my district, and I get different varying degrees of what they think is good across the scale. They're all concerned about the about the logistics, about the application, how we're going to do that, and I share that. But this doesn't change that. But what I'm accountable to is the fact that I'm put here to give my best judgment, to use the experience of my life, not to some survey, or not even to some group of conversations, to the things that I think are best for students in the state of Georgia. And that's what I'll do tomorrow, and that's what I hope you will do. And if we agree, then that's great. If we don't agree, I will love you and respect you, and we'll walk away and break bread and talk about our kids. That's okay. But hopefully the villainization of board members won't occur. But if it does, I can also live with that. I want you to know. So those are my thoughts. You can probably divine something about how I feel from that. And Mr. Chairman, I've concluded my remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. All right, and Lisa, I'll get to you in just a second. We have a follow-up portion of our meeting, and which is going to be a state schools committee function here, including a tour of an audiology lab. and so forth. So I want to wrap things up so we can move on to that. So I'm going to turn, I know Ms. Kennemore has comments. Butch or Kenneth, if you're still on the line, do you have any other comments? I'm not hearing any, so Ms. Kennemore.
No comments here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mosley. Ms. Kennemore.
I don't have a lot to say. I think this has been possibly the best conversation we've had about this subject in months. And I really do believe if this conversation that we've had today had have occurred 2 months ago, we would have been able to come to a conclusion to this matter a lot sooner. And I just wanted to bring clarity and public comment to something that Matt said, saying that the discussion about the 20%, 10%, 0.01% happened before our last meeting. That is not true. That is not true. The discussion we had at the last meeting happened at the last meeting. And my conclusion from us voting on 10% was because it was halfway from what Superintendent Woods wanted and what is already implemented. So any discussion prior to that, it did not happen. I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified and that we are not resisting anything. We are trying to work together as a board. We are one board, but we are different individuals on this board. And we are slated as constitutional officers to uphold what we deem is necessary for our students in the school systems across this state to be able to have a rigorous education that will carry them into career, college, and beyond. So with that said, I think that we have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to think about, and we have a lot to consider when it comes down to our kids and when it comes down to the percentage of weight that they will have on the EOCT. I thank everybody who has given a voice to this. I thank all of those at DOE that have looked into the matter, and I look forward to us having a deeper dive into this tomorrow and being able to take a vote.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kennemore. All right, that concludes this portion of the meeting, and with that, I'm going to now turn this over to Mr. Long for the State School Committee.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott and Kenny and Jan on the way up here. I want to thank them publicly because they actually got here early because we didn't know how long the discussion would last, so they've really been sitting here a while. Thank you, ladies, for bringing it on down. And we're going to all please make an effort to go down to the party bus in just a minute, so hold on. Go ahead, guys.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to get to show you this vehicle, and I'm going to ask Dr. Jessica Bergeron, she's our program manager, to come up and just speak for a few minutes. I know some of our board members may be new, and she'll give you a little background info about this vehicle and the importance of it, and then we'll walk down as a group to get to see it. I want to say, as a reminder, we were chosen by the folks across the street to get the funding for this vehicle. They probably could have gone to a lot of other places to do this, but with the help of the teamwork of most of you in this room, I mean, it was a pretty large lift on all of our parts to make this happen. So we're excited about what can actually result of teamwork and how many children this is going to help in our state. But sort of to frame what you're about to see, I'm going to ask Dr. Bergeron to kind of give you a little bit of backstory and what's going to happen. Sorry. Ms. Stevens.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I have this filter in my mask. We appreciate the fruits of your labor because we could not have done this without you all's support in getting this through and with our collaboration of different agencies. So Dr. Bergeron will tell you more about that, but I did want to clarify on the invitation you received, we talked about the health and safety. We would ask that you please wear a mask when you get on the vehicle because we're trying to keep it as sterile as possible. We actually have infants that get on that vehicle. So please wear your mask. In the event that you do not have one, we do have some that we can give you. We also had on there about temperature checks. We are not going to do that because we know you had to go through that to come in the building. So we're not going to waste time to have to do another temperature check. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us. Hi, State Superintendent Woods. I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you all for your support and supporting this work and listening a little bit to the conversation about this difficult decision that you all have to make. I think that one of the things I want to highlight is the fact that all of the challenges that are facing school districts are also facing the same challenges as it relates to identifying children with disabilities. So, before COVID, we had, not a great rate of identification with children with hearing loss, and it's actually gotten worse over time. And so the work that we're doing and that you guys have allowed us to do is more important than ever. So we're really excited to be back out on the road, and we're excited to be a part of this work and being able to identify children early enough that they can reach their potential for academic achievement. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. A few years ago, the state identified that children with hearing loss were very high risk for academic delays and academic failure because of lack of access to sound, which then leads to language and then leads to literacy. And so they also identified through the effort of a collaboration between different agencies, the Department of Public Health, as well as Department of Education, they also identified an opportunity to fill a gap where audiologists, licensed audiologists, have to identify children with hearing loss, but we have a shortage in our state. Possibly, but we think because of the fact that there's no university programs that train audiologists, and so the people around, the states around us are where we get our audiologists from. So because of that, we have a shortage of pediatric audiologists who can identify children with hearing loss. So the state identified this need, supported it with funding, and we got started. We got approval to purchase a vehicle, a mobile vehicle that is a full-service traveling audiological clinic. We have 2 licensed pediatric audiologists who work on staff. One of them is here. And we also have a family engagement specialist. And this is one of the areas where I feel like we're really addressing a big challenge that was parents faced when they were, when their child gets identified with a hearing loss. Now they have to figure out what to do. Where do I go? Where do I get services? How do I get into early intervention and so on? So to date, minus a big chunk of time between March and November? October. So take all of that out. To date, we have been able to screen and test 115 children. Most of those children were infants. 50% of those children are outside of Metro Atlanta. We have served over 350 families as a response to COVID. We created a battery program where families can request batteries in collaboration with a nonprofit. Families can request batteries in order so that they didn't have to leave the house. A lot of times children were getting batteries from their school or their audiologist's office. And so a nonprofit reached out to us and said, would you help us find kids who need batteries? And we said, absolutely. So at the time of COVID, the COVID shutdown, within 3 months, we had already reached 300 families who needed assistance in getting batteries. One of the interesting and really moving things about this is that families really told us that, they wanted to make sure their children could hear. And just like you guys identified, this virtual situation is really challenging, but imagine having a hearing loss on top of that. Being able to access what your teacher is saying and your family having to make decisions about going to get batteries and maybe not being able to afford it. So we were able to use the distribution network that we had to identify families, and they could apply through this nonprofit, and over 300 families have been served all over the state of Georgia through that battery program. The other great statistic is that our program has reached over 100 professionals? We've reached over 100 this is my
115.
Okay, 115.
Yeah.
Check. 115 professionals who have reached out to us for help. They need help in getting training for screening and diagnostics. They also need support in being able to help serve children with things like batteries and opportunities for them to do interventions into the classroom. So we offered during the COVID timeframe, a lot of what we did was transition much of our training over to a virtual setting so that people could have an opportunity to continue to get professional development. So we are excited to host you guys onto our vehicle. It's big, so so we have to take you down to the loading dock where it's not very pretty, but we tried to spiff it up as much as we could. But before we go, does anybody have any questions? And then we can talk. We have our whole staff here, as small as we are, and we can talk a little bit about the work that we do. But before we go downstairs, does anybody have any questions?
Will all of us be on there at the same time?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. I thought we talked about that, which that's what, an opportunity, if there's like a group-wide question, it'd be great for that. So
Yeah,
if
we'll
something
have to
about
take you down in
availability
groups.
Or timing or scheduling, I think should be asked now in front of everybody. Just throw it out there. Receptive, we're ready.
Y'all have had a lot of things on your mind today, so it's okay.
Right.
We do want to let you have a break because I know y'all probably might need to go to the bathroom, that sort of thing. So do you want to meet in the lobby so we can?
We can take we can take y'all in a group. So we can take one group, go down, go do the tour, and then come back up, and then get the next group. We can do it that way, and that way people who want a break can take a break. If people want to go now, they can go now.
What's the ideal number for a group to go tour the bus at the same time?
Five.
5? Okay. So, looks like we need 3 groups. 3 groups. So if you want to take 5 down now, they get back up here, we'll send the next 5 down. Something to that.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yes, that works.
Done after that?
Okay, and then we are done and you are ready to leave. I'm trying to think about how I need to do this. I mean, we do still need to adjourn, but, so I need a quorum to. Yeah, so the tour is. Yeah, so unless there's any other business before state committee, yes or no? State schools, rather.
Oh, no, this is our presentation.
Okay, all right. So with that, then the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a first from Mr. Downey. Is there a second? I have a second from Ms. Petty. All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned and start the tours.
One more thing, if you don't mind. If
Yes.
you can't, I guess people like Mark maybe leave.
Y'all have a good time.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Thank you, Mr. Mosley.